The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who lived in the 2nd century AD, was the author of the Meditations, the most widely read book ever written on Stoic philosophy. Stoicism is an ancient Greek school of philosophy which inspired modern, evidence-based cognitive psychotherapy. In this video, you'll learn how Marcus used Stoicism to manage anger. We know that Marcus struggled with anger himself, because he says so. At the beginning of the Meditations, he describes how, as a young man, he often felt like he was going to lose his temper with his Stoic mentor, Junius Rusticus. Perhaps he was asking the young Caesar some very challenging questions about his character and conduct. However, Marcus says that Rusticus also showed him how to overcome anger and be reconciled with his friends after an argument. So what sort of strategies would Marcus have learned from his Stoic teacher? Well, later in the Meditations, he describes 10 therapeutic techniques for managing his own anger, which he calls the 10 gifts from Apollo and his muses. Let's examine each in turn. Number 1. Remember we are social animals. The Stoics believed that human nature is both rational, in the sense that we use reason, and social, in the sense that we typically live as families and form communities. The fundamental goal of life is to achieve our potential by reasoning well and handling our relationships with other people wisely. When faced with someone who is triggering our anger, therefore, we should remember to focus on the idea that we both have the same underlying goal, to live wisely ourselves and to deal wisely with others. We were not born to squabble, but to learn from one another and collaborate. At least we have the potential to do so, as long as we set our sights on the goal of living together more harmoniously. The first step is simply reminding ourselves that humans were meant to get along, and that we all have the potential to be reconciled with one another. This first strategy is actually the one Marcus mentions most often when talking about overcoming anger. However, there are others as well. Number 2, consider their character as a whole. When we're angry with someone, we often demonize them and take their words or actions out of context. Perhaps they lied to us. If we focus on that alone, it seems all important. However, perhaps they've been very honest and helped us many times in the past. When we look at the bigger picture, it's often more complex. There's good and bad within everyone. In court, people swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But when we're angry, we often don't tell ourselves the whole truth about the other person. We commit a lie of omission by leaving out details that would lead to a more balanced view of their character. As the saying goes, to understand all is to forgive all. Even if we choose not to forgive someone completely, nevertheless, it's often difficult to become as angry with them when we understand them more completely. Number 3. No person does evil willingly. This is a famous paradox which the Stoics adopted from Socrates. Socrates believed that no man or woman is willingly deprived of the truth. Nobody wants to be mistaken, at least not about the most important things in life. Nobody wants to be mistaken, therefore, about what's morally right and wrong. When people do wrong, says Socrates, it's because they don't really understand the nature of what's good or in their own self-interest. As they're mistaken, though, they're doing wrong unintentionally, rather than willingly. Even people who don't agree with Socrates' very generous argument tend to find it an interesting way of looking at things. Marcus thought that by telling ourselves that other people are acting out of ignorance rather than malice, we can moderate our feelings of anger. Other Stoics were taught to say, "It seemed right to him," when they noticed that they were starting to become annoyed by the actions of another person. Number 4. Remember that you're not perfect. The Stoics insisted that none of us are perfect, not even the founders of their own school. We should have the humility to remind ourselves of that when we're growing angry with another person. Acknowledging your own flaws at that moment can help to moderate the intensity of your feelings of anger. Number 5. You cannot read their minds. This is simple. We can never know for certain what other people are thinking. The more angry we become, the more certain we tend to feel, though, about the motives of other people. Once we admit that we can't be sure what's going on in their minds, it's harder to feel as strongly about things. Number 6. Remember life is transient. The Stoics liked in general to remind themselves of the transience of all material things and the fleeting nature of human life. It doesn't seem worth getting as upset about many of the things other people say and do when we take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and remember that before long both of us will be dead and gone, and before long everything that passed between us will be forgotten forever. How can it make sense to get angry about trivial things when life is so short? Number 7. It's not things that upset us. This is the most famous psychological strategy of Stoicism. It's not things that upset us, but rather our opinions about them, especially our value judgments. It's not other people's actions that make us angry, but our way of thinking about them. If that weren't the case, then everyone would get angry about the same things, but they don't. What really annoys me might always be viewed with indifference by someone else. Also, what infuriates me today might seem trivial to me looking back 10 years from now. Change your thoughts in order to change your feelings. There's always another way of looking at things. Number 8. Anger does us more harm. Anger does us more harm than the things we're angry about do. This is another famous Stoic paradox. Other people's actions can only harm external things like our property, reputation and so on. Our own anger, though, harms our very character. It gets to the very core of our being and transforms our personality. Realising that our own anger is a much bigger threat to us than other people's actions will tend to make us pause before allowing our feelings to escalate. Number 9. Kindness is the antidote to anger. A very simple but powerful strategy is that if you want to remove something, try replacing it with its opposite. For Stoics, anger is deep down the desire for revenge or the desire to harm the other person. For instance, people who get into intense arguments online often act as though they're trying to hurt one another's feelings by throwing insults around. The Stoics challenge us to stop and make a conscious effort to exercise wisdom in our relationships by exhibiting kindness, the opposite of anger. We should be trying to help, not harm one another, by making each other better, not worse. Number 10. Don't act surprised. Marcus says the last strategy is the most important, and a gift from Apollo himself, the leader of the Muses. It's to completely accept that in ordinary life we're bound to encounter lots of people who say and do objectionable things. We shouldn't be surprised if sometimes others lie to us or behave badly, but rather it's something the wise man or woman anticipates, so that they can respond calmly and rationally when it happens. Apollo was the god of prophecy. Stoicism is about predicting the future rationally. The Stoics think that wisdom consists in using reason to prepare for the sort of interpersonal challenges we might encounter in life. That way we're ready to meet them with a philosophical attitude, rather than feeling surprised and caught off guard by them. Viewers, I am Donald Robertson. If you've enjoyed these strategies for anger management and found them helpful, take a look at my book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, The Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, for more tips on how to cope stoically with this and other problems. And yes, don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Smart to watch more content based on my writings.